I've emphasized 3 points: making things meaningful, making things sustainable, and making things humanity-centered, not human-centered, humanity-centered.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into Notes of Design. In this episode, I have the absolute pleasure to introduce a luminary who needs no introduction to those in the realm of design. A visionary, an author, a researcher, an educator, a cognitive scientist, and a champion of human-centered design. I'm thrilled to welcome none other than Don Norman to Notes of Design podcast. Don Norman is a legend in UX design. Since 1960s, he has been at the forefront of human-computer interaction and human-centered design. His group coined the term user experience while working as vice president of Advanced Technology Group at Apple in 1980s. Don's legendary work has transformed the fields of cognitive science and usability engineering. He has a long legacy in academia, for example, at the University of California, San Diego, where he is a professor and head of UCSD Design Labs. And he co-founded Nielsen Norman Group, a leading consultancy on user experience. He is renowned globally for his book, The Design of Everyday Things, which continues to influence and inspire designers worldwide to focus on users in their work. Throughout his extensive career, Don has always emphasized the importance of design thinking and the role of design in improving the human experience. His theories and methods have defined and revolutionized the human-centered design approach. This episode is extra special as it's our 99th episode and Don will be talking about his newest book, Design for a Better World. This book explores the critical role design plays in addressing some of the world's pressing issues from climate change and social inequality to global poverty. We'll be delving into how designers can contribute to solving these grand challenges and how cross-collaboration with scientists, policymakers, and politicians can lead to better products and services. We'll also be discussing the future of design in an age where AI is increasingly becoming a co-pilot in our design process. Lastly, for all our budding designers out there, Don will be sharing advice on how to foster an environmentally conscious design mindset, a skill that is incredibly important in our changing world. So prepare to the journey through Nodes of Design with the incredible Don Norman. Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into Nodes of Design. In this episode, we have a great honor in hosting Mr. Don Norman. Hi Don, welcome to Nodes of Design. So Don, how was your day so far?
Well, it's still morning for me. But yes, I've been doing my email and talking to people. It's interesting, by the way, that I talk to many different Indian institutions. From what I can tell in the field of design, India is at the leader in trying to change and develop more schools of design in a modern way, not the old-fashioned craft way, but really trying to approach design as a way of solving all kinds of problems. Healthcare is a good example where design can play a very important role in healthcare, which is what you are working on at Microsoft in Hyderabad.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for that. So what was your journey into design and how did you start? And what are your tips to the beginners on starting their design journey?
I didn't really start in design. I've doing what I do, which is to always get interested in new topics and move them around and decide what I think is an important thing to work on and then work on it. And after a while, I realized that what I was doing was a field that's called design. So I started off as an electrical engineer, and then I moved to psychology, but I thought I was doing the same thing. As an engineer, I studied information processing, and I applied those methods to psychology, which actually was unusual when I joined psychology. At the University of California, San Diego, I helped then develop a psychology major in information processing, and then eventually I changed to cognitive science because I wanted to bring in more fields like artificial intelligence. But in those days, it was called good old-fashioned AI, which was trying to do semantic networks and have real understanding. That is kind of dead today, but I think it's coming back. And then I wanted to bring in neuroscience, linguistics, and sociology and anthropology. And that field now has really grown. It is a very important field. And along the way, though, the new computers were coming out, and my students were starting to work at either Xerox, Palo Alto Research Center, or Apple. And they were involved in the first development of the Macintosh. And so I got more and more interested in this. And so I retired from the university and went to Apple, where I ended up being a vice president of the research group. And but as I was starting to do more applied work in industry, I realized that what I was doing was design. We called the field human-computer interaction, but actually it was more than computers. It was how do you design products or services or healthcare or standing in line waiting for something? How do you design the lines? That design is a way of thinking about problems, any kind of problem. And now I'm going to do a quick shortcut to where I am today. So I've written a large number of books about how to make products that are easier to understand, easier to use. And that's been very valuable and very important. And I'm very proud of that work. But, I'm getting older. And there's actually an Indian philosophy that as you become more successful, you have a requirement to give back to the world. Well, I'm 87 years old. And I said, it's time I thought more about the world's problems. And the work that I've been doing isn't going to change the world. And so I started thinking and planning and reading about all the issues in the world. In fact, I went to Bengaluru, and spent quite a bit of time there talking to friends there about issues in India. And I was very careful not to spend my time in rich homes and in fancy hotels, but to go out into the countryside and see the way that people were living, the way that medical care was being given. And I saw impoverished healthcare centers given by the government, which basically were one-room places with almost no equipment and facilities. And I also saw one of the most advanced hospitals that I've ever experienced. And I've traveled to many hospitals and examined the way they work across the United States. This was a wonderful facility. They were doing heart surgeries, and they were making them basically free to anybody who needed it. And it was very impressive. And I met with the user experience team there, and they were excellent as well. They were developing their own medical systems. And I said, oh, no, you can't do that. That's too big a problem. But when I saw what they were doing, I said, aha, yes, they understood and they were doing a brilliant job. So in any event, I ended up with a book called Design for a Better World. And I talked about there are many issues in the world, but I decided everybody is writing books about what's wrong with the world, and many of them are really good books. So I wanted to talk about the issues that I feel that I have something new to add. And what was new is the perspective and the way I approach the problem, and moreover, saying many of these books treat these as technological problems and they're technological solutions. The real issue, though, is human behavior. But that is what I know. I understand technology, but I also understand people. And so I've emphasized 3 points: making things meaningful, making things sustainable, and making things humanity-centered, not human-centered, humanity-centered. And that's what this book is about. So what does humanity-centered mean? Well, human-centered design, which I helped develop, is to focus on people. Make sure that the product is something that the product or service is something that people really need, they could understand. And that's important. And I think we should still do that. But this is part of the old model of design where the whole purpose of design is to increase the sales of a company, increase the profits of a company. And it takes no account of the impact of what is being done on the world itself, on the ecology, on the different kind of cultures in the world. And so humanity-centered design expands human-centered design to think that, hey, we live in a system. The world is a complex system where everything interacts with everything else. It's a complex socio-technical system, and we have to take that into account. So we have these wonderful cell phones or computers, and we never thought about how we damage the ecosystem in getting the materials to build these things, or how we damage things when we manufacture it and smoke comes out of the factories, poison gas goes into the air or into the land or into the water. And what about when it's finished? Can you take it apart and reclaim it? No. Can you even take it apart and replace the battery? No, the average person can't. So in India, for example, in Ahmedabad, which I have visited, there's mountains of trash, electronic trash that is burning. Even though there are valuable components inside each of these things, it's too difficult to take them apart. So that's what we have to stop. That's also causing the change in climate. That's also causing all sorts of difficulties across the world. And so that's a sustainability issue. But in any event, what I tried to do was address the world problems from a design perspective, which means it's a system and it's all about human behavior.
Thank you so much, sir. So in your book, you talk about the importance of designing products and systems that are more sustainable and environment friendly, right? So how do you see design playing a role in addressing these urgent issues of climate change?
Well, who is it that designs these systems that cause this trouble? It's designers. But the problem here is that designers are often not trained to think larger. And in many schools of design, what you focus upon is the craft of design. Whereas, for example, are working on medical products, and the craft of design isn't so important there. The real issue is to make sure you could measure the right medical measurements that give information to either the person or the physician. And second of all, that it works well and it provides the accurate results and that it's understandable. But the traditional craft work doesn't know how to deal with that. And design is changing. But nonetheless, almost always design is in the middle level of a company or even the university. And so designers don't say what the product ought to be, but they're told what the product will be and they have to work on it. And if they say, but this is not the way we're building it is unsustainable, either nobody will listen to them or they will lose their job. So the requirement here is there are two requirements. Designers have to understand the world more. If you want to make a difference in the world, you better understand history. You better understand politics and economics and the way and business models and the way businesses work and people and technology. We have to be much more broadly trained. In fact, I was just talking to a university in Pune called Flame University. It's a new private university, quite small, but they are trying to do this. What they do is they have a new design curriculum just announced this month. They say we need a pie education, pie. So there's a broad, general basis of knowledge across the top, and then there's a specialty in design, but another specialty. And that could be in business, or it can be in anthropology, or it can be in literature. Because, what field do you think knows the most about people? Psychology, sociology, anthropology? No. The field that knows the most about people are the people who write novels, writers. Because if you write a novel, you have to depict people, real people. The readers can say, oh, I know people like that, I hate them. Or I know people like that, I really respect and like them. And so a novelist has to be a great observer. And you have to understand people in order to tell your stories. And so education has to include all of these. Not just STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but the arts, literature, humanities, history, they're all critical. So I was very pleased that Flame is doing this. And two people just visited me from Flame, and I've given talks over Zoom to them. But I've done this to other universities also in India. And India, I think, is the one place where I see the most rapid change, more than in the United States, more than I see in Europe, even more than I see in China, which is also trying to advance design. And so I'm going to be back.
Thank you so much, sir, for that. So how could designers apply this, particularly in context of global challenges like poverty and inequality, and solve those major issues?
Well, all of these issues are really hard. But one of the things designers have to do is move up in the hierarchy. So they have to be respected. Right now, name some world-famous designers that are respected, not just by designers, but by politicians and by business leaders. How do you become the chief design officer of a company? You have to stop talking about design and start talking about the major issues. You have to understand a business model. Because if a company tries to build things, and the modern computers and mobile phones are good examples, where they become obsolete after 2 or 3 years, you have to buy a new one. Well, that's not good for the environment. Why can't we repair them and keep upgrading them? But if a company makes its money by selling a new product every 2 years or so, and you're asking them to make a product that lasts a long time, they're going to say, we can't afford to do that. We won't be able to stay in business. So you can't just say what's bad. You have to provide a solution. When I was an executive and people would come to me and say, we have problems, that wasn't useful. It's not that I did not want to know problems, but what I wanted them to do is tell me, and here is the solution. Designers don't do that yet. And when they do present a solution, it's almost always a design solution, but no. It has to be a solution that is concerned about the costs, about how many people would be interested in it, in other words, about the sales, about how it impacts everything. Designers don't do that. If you want to do the kind of change that you just asked me about, you have to think broadly about the impact upon the world with answers, not just with problems, but with approaches that actually might work.
Thank you, sir. So your book also touches on some bigger pictures like climate change and social inequality. So how do you see design fitting into these broader conversations around these topics, and what role do designers play in specifically addressing them?
Well, one of the problems of inequality is that the Western world, mostly Europe, but I blame the United States as well. Basically, we are wonderful and everybody should be like this. And so we educate people to be like the West, to think like the West, to act like the West. We use Western books. I mean, you read my books. I'm from the West. And that's making a uniform world, which often doesn't work, really. So we have destroyed lots of the valuable cultures that exist within the world. India is a really good example. The English came into India and tried to make it sort of a minor version of England. And they were also very prejudiced about the ability of Indians to rule themselves and take care of themselves. It was crazy. And so we have to overcome that, and we have to actually say, you know, there's a minority group that has a whole different way of acting, and they build things differently. We should encourage them, because this kind of diversity is powerful in the world. It increases our understanding of the world. And, you know, some of the old ways of building buildings, for example, are superior to today's ways. Because what we did today is we said, oh, we have good air conditioning and good heat. And so we can build a building any way we like, and we can ignore the sun, and we can ignore the outside temperature and just use a lot of electricity to cool or heat the building, or fossil fuels to heat the building. And that's really bad, and that's destroying the atmosphere. So we have some of the old ways of building that come from cultures. There's a lot of this is true in India, where there are really old buildings that are much more efficient than the new ones. We've lost that, and we want to it should be recovered. So the answers to the questions are really difficult, because it's very difficult to change people's behavior, especially to change the beliefs of a culture, but it has to be done.
Thank you so much, sir. So your book also talk about the need of interdisciplinary collaboration in design. So how can designers work with professionals such as scientists, engineers, or policymakers or politicians to create better products and services for a better world?
There is no choice. We have to. Because look, designers don't have any content matter. Design is a way of thinking. It's a method, an approach. And anytime we design something, we have to work with the specialists in the many different areas. And so, again, I'll come back to you. You work at Microsoft as a designer, but you have to work with, since you're working on medical products, you need experts in medicine, experts in the problem that the device you're working on must approach. You also need engineers, first of all, mechanical engineers who are doing the physical product, and second of all, computer scientists for the programming, and electrical engineers to figure out how the components fit into the space and don't interfere with each other and don't have electromagnetic radiation problems. And you have to worry about ethical issues, because medical devices can be harmful if not used right. And so there are many rules and regulations that comes from the government, but are sensible to try to make sure this is safe no matter how it is used. And you have to certainly be worried about the business issues, about whether this is actually affordable at all. And so you already have to work with a wide variety of people. And sometimes you have to work with the politicians, because, well, actually safety is a good example. Safety in healthcare often has many, many laws created by the governments to ensure safety, both electrically and in this case, medically. So designers will fail unless they are partners with everything. But I feel the designers could be the leaders. So designers are a great method. And they should have a broad knowledge, and we need then to get each of the specialties to work together. And so think of designers as orchestra leaders, conductors, And each of the specialties are the different instruments. And the job of the designer is to make sure these different specialties work in harmony with each other. All too often, the engineers argue with the people from marketing, argue with the people from business, argue with the people in finances, argue with the designers. No, we shouldn't be arguing. We should realize each of these is a valid issue they have to worry about. And so we have to design something that meets all of these different concerns.
Thank you so much, sir. So, but how could designers learn this initial seeding? So currently, what happens is in software technologies, we mostly interact with product managers and engineers at most. But how to go beyond the group and go beyond out there to have these open conversations to bring a larger impact on the society?
Well, my experience is that in many modern companies, the high-level management are very intelligent and very broadly educated. And they, even if they weren't broadly educated, they've trained themselves. So a lot of the broad knowledge that I'm talking about can be self-acquired by reading and by talking to many different groups and to working with different groups. And they understand these issues. And what they're seeking is some way of making sure that what they do is, first of all, they would like it to be good for the world. I don't believe anybody wants to destroy the world. That's crazy. But they're also concerned about their immediate success for the company. And one of the difficulties is companies today are often valued on short-term results as opposed to long-term. So we have to change that. But the way to argue for that is to demonstrate that over the long term, doing good can be good for the company as well as for the world and the people. And so I think forming a partnership means mainly going and talking to these people, to everybody else. And the problem is not to do this in the conference room where you have a big meeting and then people have disagreements, but there's no place really to sit down and talk about what the issues are. The place to talk about them is at dinner, where you have more time. And over time, if you meet with people outside of the company, you become friends with them. And once you become friends with them, they listen to what you say, and you should be listening to what they say, because both you and they will have to change some of your opinions. So it's a long-term process, but it's human behavior. People listen to people they respect. Well, how do you get respect? You have to earn it.
Thank you so much, sir. That's a beautiful advice. So wanted to know your opinion on the future of design, like with the AI coming in now. So how do you think the future of design gonna be with?
I think it's powerful. I think designers can play a much more important role in the world, in society than they do today. And as for the new tools, well, the new tools are kind of exciting. Yes, some people find them frightening. Oh, they'll take away my job. No, they won't. You know, when cameras, photography were first developed, there was a fear that we wouldn't need artists anymore because you could just take a picture. Well, yes, we did need artists, but we didn't need artists who carefully painted a picture of the world in great detail and accuracy. Yes, the cameras could do that, but we do need artists who have great imagination and creativity and are making you think about the world or about issues in different ways. And so art changed, but we need lots of artists. We still do. Photography did not change that. Now, the same with the new tools. When we use computer-assisted design tools, there was a fear at first that, well, that will take away my craft skills. Well, maybe it does. But maybe craft skills aren't the most important part of design. Maybe it's the conception that you have of what it is you'd like to accomplish, the creativity in your mind, new devices, new things, new opportunities. And yes, some of these machines will take away the tedious part of building it, but we're still left with the creative part or the judgment. And for example, today's AI can do wonderful drawings. There was an artist who won a prize with a drawing created by one of the AI systems. And people said, oh, that's horrible. You didn't do it. And he said, you're wrong. You know, it took me a month to get this, to do this. And I had to do 800 variations. And I thought of this as a collaboration, because I would ask for something and it would produce something that was worthless. And I would have to modify what I was asking for, or rethink how I was describing what I wanted. But also, sometimes it would produce things that were I never thought of that. And so I would say, let's just keep going in that direction. So in the end, he pointed out, what I got was a result that I could not have done by myself, but the system couldn't have done by itself either. It was a combination that was so powerful. And that's what I see with a lot of the generative AI tools that already exist, that already are in use. It's a combination. The tools make us smart. In fact, I wrote a book about that once. I said, things that make us smart. The technology makes us smarter. Calculators make us better mathematicians because, doing arithmetic is not mathematics. But when I'm trying to do big problems and I have to do a lot of arithmetic or algebra, I make mistakes all along the way. Well, the machine won't make mistakes, but it can't think of the problem. I can think of the problem and describe it and let the machine figure out the equations and the answer. Because then when I look at what they've done, I say, well, that's not right at all. I must be doing this the wrong way, and I have to now rethink the problem. And that's what people are good at. So I see it as a real collaboration.
Thank you so much, sir, for all these insights. So what advice would you give to young designers who want to create products and services that positively impact the world? And what skill set and mindset should they cultivate to become effective agents for the change in the future?
Learn more about the world. Learn more about politics. People say, I don't want to learn about politics. Well, there are good politics and bad politics. And the good politics is people have different opinions, or they come from different places, and they have therefore a different perspective. And quite often, each of these different opinions that contradict each other, each one is correct from the person's point of view. And what politics is about, good politics, is trying to understand each person's point of view and find some resolution. Sometimes you can find a solution if you think about it this way. You can find a solution that satisfies everybody. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you'll have to compromise. But by compromising, you get something done. If you refuse to compromise, often nothing gets done. And so you learn about the world, learn about all these different areas, and always be curious. The best way to learn about things is just to monitor about the world, and when you see something different, ask about it, learn about it, try to understand what's going on. And you'll learn a lot more that way by simply being always curious and always learning, because you can't just learn at school. You have to keep learning for the rest of your life. And so I always pride myself on learning a new topic every year. And it's really important because if you want to change the world, you have to understand the world. And the world is very, very complex. So yeah, you could have to learn a lot of different things. But after a while, it becomes fun and interesting.
Thank you so much, sir. So could you please share with us, how does your day look like, and any interesting stories?
My day is just, I'm retired, but I've retired 5 times, so I'm not very good at retiring. And what the advantage of being retired really is that I don't work for anybody. I work for myself. But it's really important for me that I keep active and keep thinking and keep learning new things and reading new books and meeting new people, traveling. Unfortunately, I couldn't travel for the last few years because of the COVID pandemic, but I'm starting to travel again, and I'm now thinking of again a trip to India, where I want to visit so many of my friends that all around the country, actually. And in fact, I haven't been to Hyderabad in many, many years. Might be interesting to go back. And I am actually giving talks now all over the world. And so one of the interesting things about the COVID pandemic is it taught us that we can actually have really good conversations over, well, like we are doing it right now. And when I give lectures or talks or discussions with 300 or even 1,000 people in the audience, it is better over the computer than it is in person. Because if it's in person and somebody in the back wants to ask a question, I can't even barely see them. But with Zoom, I can talk to them directly. They see me big on the screen. I see them right on the screen, and we can actually talk. So one thing I do is I've been spending a lot of time talking to people in Europe, teaching classes in Europe, talking to people in Latin America, teaching classes, talking to people across the United States, talking to people in China, talking to people all across India. And as I said, India seems to be the country that most often wants me to talk with them. So I've been to many different universities now in India without leaving my home in San Diego, California.
That's so wonderful, sir. We're looking forward to see you soon in Hyderabad and host a small meetup in Hyderabad once you're here. So we'll conclude the show by your 3 favorite books and also people who inspire you the most in this space.
No, I can't do that. I can't give you my favorite books because there are many books that I read. I mean, a large number of books, and I learn a tremendous amount from them. And so in many cases, my favorite book is sort of the book that I read in the last week. And so it keeps changing. And I do try on my website to list the books that have been very important. I realize, though, that I have to change what I'm doing there because in writing this book, there were many books that were extremely important to me and they're listed in the book, but therefore they're not on my website. And I said I should go through this book and look at all the books that I referred to and make sure that those are visible on the website so it's easier for people to see which ones I think are important. I get good insights and learning from so many people, talking to people, from so many videos I watch, from so many different newspapers I read, from so many different books I read that I cannot pick out the 3 most important.
So also people who had inspired you.
Well, it's the same issue. In the acknowledgments, I talk about a lot of people that really helped me and changed my views of the world. I've had many private conversations with people, and I've looked at the past, and actually one of the people I keep quoting is Victor Papanek, who was a designer in the 1970s or earlier, a long time ago. But he was an early designer, and what is impressive about his book, Design for the Real World, and you can see I have notes all over it. And the interesting thing about this book, though, is the very first sentence here. Here's the very first sentence of the book, which says, there are professions more harmful than design, but only a very few of them. And what he was talking about was why designers make all the crap that populates the world, destroys the environment. And he says, designers, it's all for designers. Now, I think he was wrong. He was right, but he was wrong. And so I use that in my book, saying, look, he was one of the first people saying all that. He wasn't the first, by the way, but he was one of the first and one of the most famous people saying this. But yes, designers are there in the middle, but that's because designers can only do what they're told to do. And I say that wasn't their fault. The fault is that designers are not in a position of power to decide what it is we should be doing in the first place. And that's why I've already emphasized in talking to you today, why designers must move up to be at a higher level of authority within their organization, whether it's a company, a university, a consultancy, private foundation, government. Designers must move up to the top, but they have to therefore change the way they think and the way they behave to do that, because they must understand, again, the world.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing all these wonderful insights with us. We are super excited to read more and learn from the book. Thank you so much for your time. We are looking forward to host you again in our upcoming episodes.
Thank you very much for having me.